Boom, I'm in the room. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Everyday Conversations regarding mental health. We've got a couple of people in. Good evening, Catherine. Good evening, Richard. So, welcome. Got a great guest on tonight. Got a really challenging story to give you tonight. So, because there's nothing on the telly, that's why you're here watching me. So, we come to you live from the old Heale Manor. Lord Heale yourself is here in the room. Right, so if you feel generous, you can always buy me a coffee. It's not compulsory. If you like, you can subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. Give us the old thumbs up. Don't mind a big thumbs up. And if you want to get notified when I do go live, all you've got to do is click the bell icon and click all, and it notifies you when I go live. You know, I've got the book out, Podcast Host Mastery, bestseller on Amazon, and hopefully towards the end of the month I'm going to be working with those guys up at the podcast show in London. So tonight we're going to be looking into suicide again. Now I've got a guest on. She's had a go at it a couple of times. Clearly wasn't successful at it, but she'll tell her own story on that, and she'll tell you how she's recovered from it and how she got into it in the first place. So, without too much further ado, let me bring on my guest. First guest. Starting to lose the plot already. Here we go then. Welcome, Susan. Thank you for joining me tonight.
It's great to be here, Tim. Thank you for inviting me on.
No, you're most welcome. So we had a little bit of a chat before the show, so I've got a rough idea of what we're going to cover. And it's quite a story. It's quite a harrowing story, really. But hopefully, going through the story and coming out the other side of it, it will give people hope. That there is something better out there. So, Susan, if you want to tell a bit of your story from the early days of what you were going through, what drove you to taking your own life or attempting to.
Yeah. When I was is when I tried to commit suicide twice, both times by ingesting 6 bottles of sleeping pills. What led up to this event was a lot of ongoing abuse in my childhood. There was a lot of verbal, emotional abuse by my father in particular. He was a control freak, and he was verbally abusive fairly consistently. It happened whenever I didn't do exactly what he told me to do. And also, there was a lot of abuse in school. Because I had such low self-esteem, the other students chose me as their target to pick on me. And it was just an ongoing thing. I always felt like I was on the outside looking in. I guess one of my saddest memories was standing alone on the playground to the side, watching all the other children play, and nobody wanted to play with me. So that became kind of the theme for my life, which led up to my suicide. What happened right before my suicide, after a years of abuse, I decided if only I could look good enough on the outside, I would feel good enough on the inside. So I went through plastic surgery. I had my nose straightened, my breasts enhanced. I started dieting. I started working out. I developed a portfolio of modeling pictures. I took them around to all of the agencies in Boston, Massachusetts, which is where I was living at the time. I got representation by the top Boston modeling agency. So I actually got everything that I wanted in the external world. I achieved my goal, but then I felt just as bad on the inside. I felt just as lost. I felt just as anxiety ridden. I felt just as stressed out. That's when I saw no way out and I tried to take my own life, which is where it all started.
So where it all started then, so you, you were bullied at school, you were bullied at home, and that had a massive impact on your mental well-being and also your self-esteem. So what what was your thinking behind taking your own life or attempting to take your own life? What was the driving force behind that?
I wanted to, after I ingested the 6 bottles of sleeping pills, I even wonder if now is an appropriate time to just read the introduction of my book, because this was where I was at when it started. At the age of 20, hopelessness and despair, I dumped 6 bottles of sleeping pills onto my bed. I had a glass of water sitting on my nightstand. I grabbed one handful of pills after another and swallowed them all. Thank God my mother drove me to the hospital in time to get my stomach pumped. I was released the next day. I made my second attempt 3 months later. I repeated the same scenario, except this time my father drove me to the hospital, and this time I was committed to an institution. I had been a victim of childhood bullying, and my self-esteem was extremely low. I had struggled with depression for years, and I couldn't seem to help the feeling that there was something wrong with me, something that made me feel like I just wasn't good enough. So I felt that there was something wrong, that I wasn't good enough. I felt a lack of connection. I felt completely separated from other people. What I didn't know at the time is that the reason I felt separated from other people was because I was separated from myself. There was something inside that I didn't know how to resolve. And I remember after ingesting the 6 bottles of sleeping pills, lying there in my bed, deciding if I was going to jump up and tell my mother to drive me to the hospital or lay there and die. I imagined my father looking over my dead body in tears. And in my mind, his tears over my death would make the attempt worthwhile. You see, my dad was stoic. He never showed me any love, and I always craved his connection. I craved his attention. I craved his love. So what led up to the suicide attempt is that I couldn't connect with other people. I was also very sexually promiscuous because I was trying to attain connection through the physical body. What I didn't realize at the time is that was impossible. You can't get connection through sex. It doesn't work that way. So what led to my suicide attempt specifically was lack of connection with other people. What I realize now is I didn't know how to connect to myself.
Wow. So I mean that was the driving force that you thought that your father would hurt more by your death than you wanted to live at that stage. So just run us through what happened then.
Well, I was lying there in my bed with 6 bottles of sleeping pills inside of me. I had this vision. I don't know how I remember this, but it was 38 years ago, but I do remember it vividly, of my dad lying over my body in tears. You see, I never saw my father cry. And then I realized that I didn't really want to die. I just wanted to kill the pain. And I jumped out of bed. I ran across the hallway to my parents' bedroom where my mother was getting ready. And I told her what I had done. I told her that I had ingested 6 bottles of sleeping pills. She didn't believe me. I kept telling her over and over. Finally, she realized I was telling her the truth. And we got into the car and started driving to the hospital to get my stomach pumped. I remember in the car, she was a lot more nervous than I was. For some reason, I just knew that I didn't want to die anymore and I had to get those pills out of my stomach.
Well, I guess you was half asleep at the time with all those sleeping pills inside you.
Well, I was the one with the sleeping pills inside of me, but I just kind of was going into this adrenaline rush, I think, because I was so scared. She was completely and totally devastated that I had done that, because she knew I was depressed. And a couple months prior to my suicide attempt, she said to me, if you ever do anything to hurt yourself, she said, it would just kill me. So I actually, despite her warnings, did something that would hurt myself. And it was a tragic event. But I was not in my right mind.
Yeah. I mean, you can get in a pretty dark place to
It
want
was
to
a
do
very
that in the first place.
It was the deepest, darkest place that I've ever been in. I would call it the dark night of the soul. And I would never want to experience anything like that again. At the time, I had no emotional or spiritual tools at all. So I was just completely lost.
So you got to the hospital then eventually because you had to stop off on the way.
I did. My mother was driving the car. I was the one that was having the kind of adrenaline rush because I was so scared. And she said, "There's an urgent care unit. Should we stop there?" I didn't know, so I just screamed yes. We stopped at the urgent care unit, and they did not have the ability to pump my stomach. They just didn't have the equipment. So what they did is they called an ambulance to come get me and take me to the hospital where they could pump my stomach. So that was the wrong decision to stop there. We were just wasting time. And I remember while I was there in the urgent care facility waiting for the ambulance, I asked the nurse if I was going to die, and she looked at me and she said, "I don't know." And I was horrified. I was more scared than I ever can remember being, because I could have died. But the ambulance came and took me to the hospital, and they pumped my stomach in time, and I had no physical repercussions.
But it didn't stop you doing it a second time. So you've obviously liked having a lot of washing up liquid poured down your throat to make you sick. So,
That's
tell us,
correct. I
tell us.
I I should have been so relieved. I mean, I assume that after ingesting 6 bottles of sleeping pills, I mean, things could have gone wrong with my body, but I was physically okay. And anyone in their right mind would never repeat that after getting through the event the first time, but I was just not in my right mind. So I repeated the same thing a second time. And the second time, when I jumped out of bed and I ran across the hallway to my parents' room, it was my father that was there. And what he said to me, he said, in a loud voice, he screamed at me because he thought I was crazy. He said, "Well, if you want to die so bad, go for it." And he was initially refusing to drive me to the hospital. He had a completely different character than my mother. My mother was always giving. My dad was always um, projecting his fear onto me. He was always very condescending, belittling. He was very verbally abusive. So he said to me, "If you really want to die so bad, go for it." And then I begged him to take me to the hospital, and he did. He took me directly to the hospital. I got my stomach pumped, but this time, instead of releasing me to go home, they made me stay in a locked psychiatric ward because they saw me as a risk to myself. I wasn't considered safe, so I had to stay in a psychiatric unit for a while.
Hmm. So, how long did you spend in there?
A few months in the unit, in the locked unit.
And what was the treatment like that you received in there? What was the program that they put you on to assess you? I guess.
There were therapy sessions. I wasn't ready to be helped at that point. So, although there were therapy sessions and just nurses to make sure, I mean, I was in a place where I couldn't hurt myself. So there was, food and staff to make sure I was safe, but I definitely wasn't ready to be helped at the time. So none of the therapy sessions worked. I just kind of, as soon as I got in there, I wanted to get out.
Hmm.
I even escaped one time. I figured out how to escape and I started running around trying to find a safe place to go to other than the psychiatric unit. I called an ex boyfriend on a payphone, but he never answered the phone. I had nowhere to go. I ended up going back to the hospital, and my punishment was they kept me there longer. So I was stuck there longer. But most of the time I was there, all I did is eat and sleep. And um, it was just a very dark time in my life.
Hmm. Did they address at all the deep problems that you were suffering? Like, did they identify that the abuse that you were getting was because your parents had suffered a similar sort of abuse when they were young? Did they delve into that at all?
No, they did not. No. Um, I mean, that's really what happened. There were feelings, emotions that needed to be addressed. Neither my dad's side of the family or my mom's side of the family felt comfortable in sharing feelings. And because they felt so uncomfortable sharing their own feelings because they weren't taught how to share their own feelings, they didn't they felt uncomfortable with my feelings, And that's what I needed to learn how to do. I needed to learn how to own these uncomfortable feelings. I needed to learn how to own my pain, and that was where my healing lied. But my parents never addressed that in their upbringing. And at the hospital at that time, at the age of 20, that's not where I had any kind of psychotherapy that was beneficial because I wasn't ready to hear it. That's what I remember. I just wasn't ready to hear it.
Yeah.
I wasn't ready to heal. I wasn't open.
So let's move on a little bit then. So when you came out of the hospital for the second time, what happened to you then?
Well, I went through a few years. I don't remember exactly how long. It was maybe a couple of years, over a year, I should say, over a year of just staying in bed, eating, smoking, um, sleeping, doing anything I could to avoid the pain, to escape anything that I was feeling. And finally, I just got out of bed because I was so tired of just laying in bed all day. I was 50 pounds heavier. I was overweight at this time. And I got a job as a waitress just to get myself back into the world. I started taking care of myself again, eating better, dieting. I started working out, and I just stepped back into the world slowly. But I forced myself, to go to my waitressing job. I just forced myself to get out of the house. Eventually, I started back up as a model. I decided to try that particular career again. I moved to New York City, and I was back looking like myself, feeling like myself. And when I was 25 years old is when I found the spiritual truth that really was my way out of hell. It's called A Course in Miracles, which is the spiritual truth that I've been studying and teaching now for 33 years. A Course in Miracles combined with seeing a psychologist was what enabled me to heal. When I saw a psychologist after the age of 25, and I realized that healing was possible, and I tried to allow the healing to work, is when the healing did work. Before the age of 25, I was forced into therapy, but it didn't work because I wasn't ready to heal. After the age of 25, I started therapy. I started A Course in Miracles, which is a spiritual psychotherapy. And the combination of the two is what gave me insight into what actually happened. And that's where my healing began.
So was that quite a long journey then to
Oh yeah.
recover?
Yeah. And it's ongoing. I'm still on the journey, you know? However, I'm at a different place now than I was way back then. I think once before, again, the age of 25, I didn't realize that there was so much emotional abuse in my family because I didn't know what a healthy family was like. I thought the problem was me. I thought there was something wrong with me because it wasn't physical abuse. It wasn't so visible to the common person. It was emotional abuse. My therapist, when I was older, told me what was happening. There was emotional incest from my father. but I didn't realize it was going on, which is why I turned the anger inward and tried to kill myself. What I realized later in life is that my father was the problem, and it's not about blaming him. That's something else. I don't want to blame him because I still believe he did the best he could based on his childhood. But I needed to identify the problem in order to heal the wound. And that's what I was able to do through psychotherapy. And again, A Course in Miracles.
Yeah. So all this time, were you still working as a model, or had you changed jobs? I mean,
Yeah,
what were
I
you
modeled for
doing?
about 20 years from the ages of 25 to 45. I modeled mostly commercial print in New York City. That is what I was doing, and it was enjoyable. I enjoyed being in New York City. It was very open minded, multicultural, and metaphysical. It's where I found A Course in Miracles. I was invited to a Marianne Williamson lecture when I was 25 years old, and that is the first time that I heard about A Course in Miracles and everything that she interprets A Course in Miracles. She's running for Democratic president right now here in the United States, and she is the most famous interpreter of A Course in Miracles. She's who brought me to that spiritual text. So I love New York City because there were so many different types of people, and I found what I was passionate about there.
Terrific. So if there's anybody watching wants to ask any questions at all, just pop in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer your questions. So going through this miracle process, how regular was it? How many times a week did you have to turn up? Did it fit in with your work life as well?
Oh, it did. It did. Uh, yeah, it's what A Course in Miracles is. It's a spiritual psychotherapy. It's a self study program. It was actually written by, scribed, I should say, by Helen Schuckman, who was a professor of medical psychology at Columbia University in New York City. She scribed this material with the help of her colleague, Bill Thetford. And what it is the words of Jesus Christ. He was channeling spiritual truth through her. He chose her. She was Jewish. She didn't practice the religion of Judaism. She was an atheist, and I think he chose her because she was a clear channel. And what A Course in Miracles does is it points. It's based on Freudian psychology, so it kind of helps us identify the blocks that we have to love, because our true nature is one of peace, love, joy, and happiness. I start out my book. I read a little bit of the introduction. Another part of my introduction states, my passion is God. God is love and joy and beauty. He is all that is good in the world. Everything else is our own miscreation. When we are filled with joy, we are connected to God. When we are not joyful, we have lost our connection to all that is real. This is my message. It can be clarified with 3 simple words: surrender to joy. There is nothing to find. All we need to do is surrender. So what that paragraph that was downloaded to me is stating is the truth behind A Course in Miracles. Our true nature is one of peace, love, joy, and happiness. But what we need to do is we need to own the pain, identify our pain points in order to release them and get to the other side of them. So the reason that I was suicidal is because I wasn't able to identify the pain. And what I realize now, I mean, I still have pain. I'm not enlightened yet. But when the pain comes up, I do my best to own the pain, identify the pain, and then turn that pain over to a power greater than myself. That's what I'm able to do now that I wasn't able to do 38 years ago.
So, from the perspective of addressing the issues that you had with your parents, has that helped at all? Have you been able to rectify things with your parents? Have you been able to forgive them and come to terms with what they did to you?
Yes. Yes, I love both my parents very much. I mean, my mother was a lot like I think of Mother Teresa as being. She was unconditionally loving. However, she had a hard time with self-care. So that created its own set of challenges in terms of how she treated me. She did everything for me. She neglected her own emotional needs quite often, which is why I believe she died at such a young age. She died at the age of 52, almost 53, of ovarian cancer. Although she did everything for other people, she neglected her own needs. And I loved her very much. I mean, it was I was so close with my mother. And I believe I still am. I believe her spirit is with me. My father was the opposite. He projected his fear onto me and my sister. And he was the one that was more blatantly abusive. He died a year and a half ago at the age of 97. So he lived to a very old age. He's a World War II veteran. At the end, he had severe dementia, so he was childlike in a lot of ways. I would go to his nursing home. I would visit him 3 times a week. He lived closer to me, so I was the primary caretaker. And every time I saw him, I would just pray to be able to forgive him totally and completely, because I believe our way out of pain is by forgiving anyone that has ever victimized us. So every time I would go to see him, I prayed for forgiveness. Now, he never understood that he was abusive to me. He was just a result of his own upbringing, and there was a lot of abuse there. So he never intentionally meant to abuse me. It's just because he hadn't processed his own pain, he projected that pain onto me. And I realized that through all the study of psychotherapy that I've done over the years. So at the end, I would always pray to forgive him, and a lot of forgiveness took place. I remember times at the end when he was in bed, I would play Shirley Temple on YouTube on my phone, which he loved, and he would just watch this Shirley Temple singing on the Good Ship Lollipop like a child, and his head would bop back and forth. And I loved him. I love that vulnerability, but I also love everything he was and everything he taught me. He was abusive, but he had a lot of good qualities also. And I believe that our freedom lies in forgiving the people that victimized us. And I think by truly forgiving him, that's where I'm able to connect to my passion and my purpose in life. I think by overcoming our challenges, that's where we find our true freedom.
Yeah. And what about your sister? Did she suffer similar to you? You obviously grew up together.
She
Are you a
does.
similar age?
Yeah, she's 5 years younger than I. She's not as spiritual as I am. I always talk about A Course in Miracles, and she respects that. However, she doesn't study it herself. She's not particularly religious either. She's very psychologically astute. She knows probably more than than I do about the dynamics of my family. She's extremely intelligent, and yeah, she is. I'm so glad that I have her because we can relate to the emotional struggle, the dysfunction in our family, and yeah, she can relate to everything that I'm talking about now. She just has her own way of dealing with it. I think, for her it's more of like an emotional challenge, and she reads a lot of psychology books. For me, I handle it in a more of a spiritual way, whereas I
Mm.
study A Course in Miracles.
Yeah. Are you able to talk to her about what you went through, particularly your two attempted suicides? Have you
Yes.
discussed that with her and looked at if she's had a similar sort of experience?
Yes. Yeah, I've talked to her about it. She has had a similar sort of experience in terms of the emotional challenges that she's had. And, she's the only one alive that can really relate to my emotional struggle in almost exactly the same way. I mean, she's a different person, so it affects her a little bit differently, but yeah, she can relate to everything that I'm talking about. And she does work on forgiveness as well. you know um, she has two children. She's an incredible mother. She encourages her children to feel their feelings because in our upbringing we weren't allowed to feel our feelings. So she uses the challenges from our family to be a better parent to her children. And my niece and nephew, they're amazing. They're very much in touch with their feelings, and I think she's overcome a lot, and she's a stronger mother because of her challenges, and I'm so
Mm.
grateful that I have her.
Yeah. So you're able to talk about it openly with her. You're able to look forward, I guess, and to be a lot more open than you were in the past when your parents were around.
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I don't have any children myself. I didn't get married till later in life. So I guess that just wasn't my path in this particular lifetime. But my sister has two children, and she teaches them everything that we weren't taught. So she has healthy communication in her family, and my nephew is just about to go for his master's in Norway. We live here in the Boston, Massachusetts area, and he's going to go overseas for his master's, which is where my mother is from. My mother is from
Hmm.
Norway. My niece is going to the University of Vermont, and her family is doing very, very well. And again, I think she has used the challenges from our childhood, as an impetus to do better in life. I think you can do that when you overcome the darkness. I guess it's about bringing the darkness to the light. And I think most people that are successful, they're not successful despite the challenges. They're successful in life because of the challenges. Without the challenges, they wouldn't be as successful as they are. And I mean, what is success? I mean, I think for my
Mm.
sister, it's a good mother and a good wife, and she has a good life. And for me, it's my book and my message and A Course in Miracles. And I don't think I would have found this spiritual truth if it wasn't for the challenges that I have had to overcome. And again, I'm a work in progress. I'm still in the process of overcoming them, but I am definitely at a much better place. I mean, today's lesson in A Course in Miracles, every day has a different lesson, and yesterday's lesson is, and again, it uses traditional religion terminology, but it's not a religious book. It's just a spiritual philosophy. It's a self-help psychotherapy. So yesterday's lesson, actually, lesson 123, is I thank my father for his gifts to me, which sounds religious, but it's all about being grateful. When we can be
Mm.
grateful, that's a very easy way to connect to our inner essence. And then the day before, the lesson is all about forgiveness. Forgiveness offers everything I want. So those are like two basic principles that I try to adhere to. Because if I see myself, I mean, yes, we need to own the pain, but if I see myself as a victim, it's just keeping me down, and it's very like low energy. It's toxic. But if I can forgive, and if I take responsibility for my life, and I can own the pain, own my pain, that's a way to live an empowered life. I mean, I think that's huge. Taking responsibility for everything that I'm experiencing, and even the suicide. I mean, I don't think suicide is ever the option. I mean,
Mm.
there's lessons that, I mean, I guess that's obvious, but there's lessons that we all need to learn by being here. And I think those lessons are all about how to connect to that place of unconditional love. We need to learn to love ourselves totally and completely. That's our lesson. So
Mm.
suicide never accomplishes anything. I mean, I personally believe in reincarnation. If we don't learn our lessons in this lifetime, we just have to come down and learn them in the next lifetime. So I'm learning as much
Oh,
as possible in this lifetime.
well, when I come back, I want to come back as a cat, especially
Why
my
is
cat.
that? Why is that?
My cat lives a fantastic life. So you mentioned that your mother was Norwegian.
She
Were you brought
was.
up were you brought up bilingual by chance?
No. And I always wish I understood Norwegian, because then I could speak to my relatives over there. I think my mother never taught my sister and myself Norwegian, is because she wanted us to be real Americans. I think
Mm.
she felt a little insecure about the fact that English her English was great, but it took her, when she first met my father, she had broken English. She couldn't speak the language when she first met my father. So it took her a long time to learn the language. And she didn't want my sister and I to struggle. So she never taught us Norwegian, which
Mm.
is too bad. I can just speak like a few words. God Heale is Merry Christmas. I mean, just a few words. That's it.
Yeah, that's a shame. I say I know lots of bilingual parents, or lots of parents that teach their children, and it's quite funny. A friend of mine, his mother was Swedish, and used to go around there, and they used to speak. One week they'll speak Swedish in the house, the next week they'll speak English in the house, and that's how it went. And if you turned up on the Swedish week, you wondered what was going on.
I
So
remember my father used to my father was very funny. Everyone, they have their good qualities and their not so good qualities, but he was very funny. He loved to joke. And I remember he would, the Norwegian, they speak with a kind of dialect, like an up and down
yeah.
dialect. And so he used to pretend to speak Norwegian, and he would go schnock, he would just like say all this gibberish, and he would try to copy my mother, and it was really kind of entertaining. I always thought it would be super cool to be able to speak another language fluently, but she just chose
Mm,
not to teach me and my sister. I think by teaching a child to speak another language as a child, it's great because they learn to think in both languages. They don't have to,
yeah.
think in English and then think in the other language, but it just never happened that way.
Mm. Yeah, I speak a little bit Norwegian, just a little bit.
Oh,
Hvordan
you do?
står til i dag? Bebra, fint. So I spent quite a bit of time in Norway, so
Oh, you
back in the day.
did?
Yeah, yeah, I was fairly fluent for a while, but when you don't use it, you tend to lose it. But
Hmm.
yeah, I love Norway. It's a fantastic country.
Yeah, I've been there 5 times. The last time was years ago, though. I remember it was very, very beautiful over there.
Hmm. So, Susan, where can people find your book?
My book was released on Amazon on Easter. It is entitled Surrender to Joy From Suicide to Serenity. I have a copy right here. And it's by Susan Michel. They can purchase it on Amazon. It's not expensive. It's only $12.96. It's a easy read in a way. It's sprinkled with excerpts from A Course in Miracles. It's about my journey from the darkness to the light. And also, my website is surrendertojoy.net, www.surrendertojoy.net, where everybody can learn a little more about me. And yeah, so uh,
So,
it's,
are you planning it to go out an Audible
yes.
version?
Yeah, I am planning to get it on Audible. I listen to tons of books on Audible. I love Audible. I actually listen to the text of A Course in Miracles on Audible like over and over. So, yes, in the near future, I will get it on Audible. It's not there yet.
So, will you read it yourself, or will you get somebody in to do it?
I'll read it myself.
So you need to find a studio, and it takes a little bit of a while to get it put together. But once it's done, it's awesome. I love listening to audiobooks. Um,
Oh, I love
yeah,
listening to audiobooks also. Yeah,
yeah,
because then, while I do a lot of workouts. So while I'm on the treadmill, I can listen to Audible. Driving in my car, I drive a lot. I can listen to Audible. It's great.
yeah. So it's a good way of doing it. So myself, I'm a little bit on the dyslexic side, so it takes me twice as long to read a book. But I do love listening to them. So there you go.
Yeah, my husband likes to read. He does. I always try to get him to listen to Audible, but he just learns more by reading and focusing that way. But I'm more of an Audible learner. We all have our own way
Mm,
of comprehending material. One is not
yeah,
better than the other. It's just different ways of retaining the information.
absolutely. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. So, Susan, thank you so much. I've really
Thank you,
enjoyed that.
Tim. This was great. You asked some fabulous questions. It really made me think. Thank you.
Well, well, hopefully, if somebody watches this or listens to this, because it goes out on the podcast as well, if we can help one person see the light and get themselves out of that darkness from taking their own life, then I think we've achieved an aim.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, it's not until we can really face our own darkness that we can find the light. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, if I hadn't had that dark night of the soul, if I hadn't had that suicidal depression, I might not have found the path that I'm on now. It's very difficult when you're going through it, but it's just, I think, owning the pain is important. I think there's help out there too. There's
Yeah.
so much help out there. So it's important to reach out for help. I think, I'm a strong believer in therapy and psychotherapy. So yeah, please just
Sometimes all it takes is to have a chat with a stranger sometimes. Just to open up sometimes and just unburden yourself. And there is always somebody out there that will listen. So if you take nothing else from this, there is light at the end of the tunnel. There is
oh,
light from the
there is.
darkness.
There is, and I
Absolutely.
and I and I strongly believe too. If you pray, and again, I'm A Course in Miracles is not religious, but there is a higher power that's watching out for all of us, and to just pray and ask for guidance. That guidance will come. It always does.
Mm, absolutely. Well, I can't thank you enough. Thank
Thank
you for
you,
being on
Tim.
the show.
It was my pleasure.
If you just like to hang around and we'll have a quick wash up.
Okay.
So, boom, that's it. Hopefully, you've enjoyed that episode. Hopefully, you've taken something from it. And hopefully, if you are in a dark place, then there is light at the end of the tunnel. There is ways forward. So, until next week, don't forget Tuesday, the quiz. Got a great quiz for you. It's a coronation special quiz. That's going to be a really good one. Next week, or Sunday, I've got another great episode going out on Ordinary People's Extraordinary Stories. And next week, I'll have another guest on ready for everyday conversations regarding mental health. So until next week, TTFN. Ta-ta for now.